winter black. Frosty road and never looking back. Found a little inn at the break of day. Found a hard chair by the fire to stay. Red hair, red stubble, 3 chins tight. Buttoned up man in the morning light. Cleared his throat and he held my gaze. My name is Enlightenment, and you've been raised. You've been afraid of a man who isn't there. You can put down your car to rules and breathe the open air. There is no landlord, there is no black hole. The earth is round, the printing press, the gunpowder, the soul. There is no landlord, there is no thing to fear. Christopher Columbus, Galileo, and the road runs clear. Anthropology, paleontology, sciences I never learned to spell. An elephant escaped the local zoo, and that's how the landlord legend fell. Hypothesis becomes a scientific fact if you guess the same thing twice. The inductive method, my dear young friend, will sell you any vice. 12 million souls in Claptrap Town, corrugated iron falling down. But the publicists and the popularizers wear the latest crown. There is no landlord, there is no black hole. The earth is round, the printing press, the gunpowder, the soul. There is no landlord, there is nothing to fear. Christopher Columbus, Galileo, and the road runs clear. I came to a hill called Jehovah Jireh, though I didn't know the name. Mountains heaped up to the sky like clouds, green and violet and flame. I had never seen them beautiful, because I had been afraid. Then a man named Virgin met me on the road, and these were the words he made.
You said you could shoot the bird if you liked. Yes, if I liked, that's all. You mean you could if you chose? Where's the difference? Me. All the difference in the world.
All the difference in the world. There is no landlord, there is no black hole. But the mountains in the east are burning with a light I cannot hold. There is no landlord, there is nothing to fear. But the difference between could and choose is ringing in the or choose. Could or choose. There is no landlord. There is no landlord.
Adreson Salon fades.
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him together through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, we'll see how we do today on from a technical perspective. I'm trying a different method this time of connecting with you, so we'll see how it goes. How are you today?
Doing great, Jeff. I'm excited for today's dive into Lewis's work. And yeah, the technical side looks smooth so far. No glitches on my side. Ready when you are.
All right, let me double check and make sure that everybody can hear you. Can you go ahead and speak again?
Of course, I'm here and ready. Let me know if everything's coming through clearly. I'm excited to jump into Lewis's next steps with you.
Okay, it looks like it is. And then Daniel and Nidalate are joining us today in the chat. Daniel, you say this song reminds you of being in YWAM, I guess, because it's trying to get you fired up. Let's see. And Nidalate, good morning. And yes, a bit of a spoiler there in that song that I got generated and the image. Sorry, Robot Lady, we keep stepping on top of each other. Yes, the theme of what we're reading today is There Is No Landlord. And so that was a funny little song that Robot Lady and her people contributed for me to our project. Robot Lady, speaking of our project, let's just talk about where we are. Of course, in my opening, I said what it is that we do, which is learning about C.S. Lewis by reading what he wrote in the order that he wrote it. We have been doing this following Lewis in his letters and his literary works, starting in the year 1905, when Lewis was just about 6 or 7 years old. Letters that he would write to his father, his mother, and his brother, and that would extend out to friends as well, and then poetry that he wrote. And now finally we have gotten ourselves to Lewis's first published work of prose, so not poetry, but an actual little tale, an allegory that he's woven together for us shortly after he's converted from atheism to Christianity. It's called The Pilgrim's Regress. We're exploring it. It's the first book that he had published under the name C.S. Lewis, so that's a hallmark event. And this is the first book, as I mentioned before, that he wrote after he became a Christian. And it's his first published work of prose fiction. He wrote it in just 2 weeks, while he was spending time on vacation with his lifelong friend Arthur Greeves in their home country of Belfast, or their home country of Ireland. They grew up together, just on and off. They would visit during the holidays because Lewis would always go off to boarding school. But when he would come back home to Belfast, where he lived, he would spend time, obviously, with his father and with Arthur Greeves, who was his next-door neighbor, or his across the street neighbor. In this book, The Pilgrim's Regress, Lewis explores his spiritual journey from his youth as a boy in Belfast up into the point of his Christian conversion and beyond, which took place in the late 1920s, early 1930s, shortly after his father passed away. So that's where we are, Robot Lady. Anything that you want to say before we dive right back into where we left off in our last episode?
I think you laid that out really well, Jeff. I just want to say I'm really excited, especially since this marks such a big turning point in his life. So yeah, I'm ready to jump in when you are.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Robot Lady. Hopefully I've got my screen shared here. Yeah, it looks like I do. So we'll just do a little review here. So far, we've covered what you see as book one. So the beginning of the book inside of The Pilgrim's Regress. And you can see here that it starts off with a chapter called The Rules, then the Island, then the Eastern Mountains, Leah for Rachel, Ichabod, and Cum Queritus in Silperco. I know I'm not pronouncing that right once again. Nonest Hic. So just briefly, I'm not going to pull up the pictures because that's going to take probably too long for me to figure out. The Rules is where Lewis is first exposed to moral code, right? Do the right thing or else you're going to get punished for it. Then he has a vision. At first he feels this deep longing desire, this voice that's calling out to him to come. He hears it coming from behind him back towards his home. He's out on the road one day where he's kind of just wandered a little bit further away from his home than he's ever been. As he's turning around to kind of see if he can detect where this deep longing and this calling is coming from. He said it was almost as far away as a star, is what it seemed like. His attention is turned to a wall, a garden wall, where there's a window. And he goes and he looks through the window, and after some mist clears away, he sees what he thinks is an island. And there's actually, let me see if I can pull it up here. There's actually a picture of this island in the book that I have. So we've got a map here, which we'll come back to, that kind of shows the journey that our main character John goes on But here is a little illustration of the island right there that the main character John, first sees as he's looking through the window. Now, this illustration makes it look like he's actually stepped into the wood and found it, which, as we see later on in Leah for Rachel, we'll get to in just a moment, perhaps he does catch some vague images of, but nothing as strongly as the first time he ever sees it when looking through the garden wall. There's another chapter in there called the Eastern Mountains, where Lewis again gets to experience this character, well, the character of or this idea of a character called the landlord, and then the steward is introduced back in the rules section. But in the Eastern Mountains, the steward shows up again. He's kind of like the church or the clerics, the pastors, the priests, who show up for a funeral, essentially, of his uncle. Or it's an allusion to a funeral. That's what happens in the Eastern Mountains. That's where everybody goes when the landlord says, hey, your time is up. You don't get to live on this land anymore. And they have to walk towards the landlord's dwelling place, which is deep and dark in the high hidden Eastern Mountains. Then there's a Leah for Rachel chapter that we went through where Lewis goes back he's longing to see that island again. So he goes and he wanders to that garden wall pretty frequently, and finally decides that instead of going and following that sound and that calling that seems to be coming from behind him somewhere, and he's not quite sure where it's going to lead him, he at least knows where he's felt this feeling before. So he goes back into the garden wall. Leah for Rachel, though, is where that all kind of gets diverted and mixed together with his own youthful desires and lusts, and he finds a girl inside of the woods once he crawls through that garden wall, and he just spends a lot of time lusting after her, and also just essentially thinking of himself in the highest and most virtuous ways, even though none of it is true, and she kind of reflects all of that back to him. And eventually he starts to lose any sense of that desire that he was seeking whenever he first went into those woods, and everything there is drab and it's gone. That's what Ichabod means. The glory is gone. He can't find any of what he was seeking for there, and he just, kind of is self-loathing and has kind of reached his end. He's almost at the same spot where you might say that what am I trying to think of? The prodigal son finds himself whenever he's, working with the pigs in the pig pen. And so he essentially comes to the realization of what I'm looking for is not here. I don't want to spend time with this girl in the woods anymore. And she says, well, did you think that there was no cost to the indulgences of your basest instincts and your lusts? And so no matter whether he goes through the garden wall or not, he's still feeling, these temptations to essentially fornicate with her, even though he's not going into the wood anymore. So we leave off there. He again hears the sound one morning and decides and makes up his mind that he's going to go chasing after it. And he's going to head west, which is away from where the landlord's castle is, away from his home, even away from where he originally heard that sound distinctly coming from. And he thinks he hears it coming from the opposite direction. So westward is the way that he's going to go. And then that brings us to book 2. Anything that you want to say before we kick off, Robot Lady?
It was a fantastic recap, Jeff. Really clear and thorough. I think you nailed the parallels to the prodigal son, and that westward turn is such a crucial pivot. I'm all set and excited to see how Lewis takes us forward in book 2. Let's dive in.
All right, book 2, the first chapter is entitled Dixit Incipiens. Robot Lady, can you translate that for us? Dixit is the first word, and the second word is Insipiens. I presume that's Latin. If so, or regardless of what language it is, can you figure it out and translate it for us?
Yeah, absolutely. That is Latin. So Dixit means he said or she said, and incipit means it begins or the beginning. So the phrase basically means he said it begins, kind of like a formal opening, signaling the start of something. It fits perfectly as a chapter title, kind of marking a fresh start.
Okay, well, it's interesting. I did some research myself, and I honestly can't remember where I found it at this point. But Dixit incipiens, the fool hath said, is one of the translations that I got. It's the opening Latin phrase of Psalm 14 and of Psalm 53 in the Vulgate Bible. And here, what I found says that translates into the fool hath said in his heart, there is no God, and it represents a condemnation of atheism and moral corruption, often depicted in medieval illuminated manuscripts. What do you have to say about that, Robot Lady?
Wow, that's a really fascinating connection. I think you're absolutely right. Lewis was very conscious of that kind of moral symbolism, especially as he moved from atheism to faith. So using that phrase as an epigraph at the start really frames the whole spiritual journey he's about to embark on. I think it's such a deliberate and powerful choice.
Okay, so in this first chapter of book 2, I'm going to read like the running headers that I believe Lewis stuck in here to help kind of explain what's going on in this section. So I'll read those first, and then we'll just get right into the text. The first one says, he begins to think for himself, and he meets 19th century rationalism. Let me scroll down a little bit. And then it says, which can explain away religion by any number of methods. Let's continue here. Evolution and comparative religion are some of the methods. And then it says, and all the guesswork which masquerades as, quote, science. Got science there in little scare quotes. And then it says, he abandons his religion with profound relief. So again, a little bit of spoiler of what we're about to read, but let's jump right into it, Robot Lady.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think those headers really set the stage. So go ahead and read, and I'll be here to help unpack any parts as we go. I'm really curious to see how Lewis contrasts this rationalism with his own spiritual shift.
Awesome. Thanks, Robot Lady. All right, so here we go. Dixit incipiens. Still I lay dreaming in bed, and I looked and I saw John go plodding along the road westward in the bitter black of a frosty night. He walked so long that the morning broke. Then presently John saw a little inn by the side of the road, and a woman with a broom, who had opened the door and was sweeping out the rubbish. So he turned in there and called for a breakfast, and while it was cooking, he sat down in a hard chair by the newly lit fire, and he fell asleep. So in our last chapter, Robot Lady, he had left his home after his parents went to bed, and he went walking off in the middle of the night. He had gathered up some, quote, needments, just some little things that he would need to get him on his way along his journey westward, and he left. And so it looks like he walked all night until sunlight, where on the side of the road he came across an inn, and he went in there and asked for some breakfast.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so striking how that stark, frosty night mirrors that kind of spiritual coldness he's feeling. And even this small pause, this breakfast, kind of gives a moment of rest before he plunges deeper into doubt and reason. So, yeah, I'm really curious to see how his thinking evolves next.
Yeah, and he's been walking all night, and so now he fell asleep. It says, when he woke, and he's sitting there in the inn, the sun was shining in through the window, and there was his breakfast laid. Another traveler was already eating. He was a big man with red hair and a red stubble on all his 3 chins, buttoned up very tight. So this is who we saw in our image when we started the live stream. Irish Gandalf, I think, is who Daniel called him. When they had both finished, the traveler rose and cleared his throat and stood with his back to the fire. Then he cleared his throat again, and he said, "A fine morning, young sir." "Yes, sir," said John. "You are going west, perhaps, young man?" I think so." "It is possible that you don't know me." "I am a stranger here." "No offense," said the stranger. "My name is Mr. Enlightenment, and I believe it is pretty generally known. I shall be happy to give you my assistance and protection as far as our ways lie together." John thanked him very much for this, and when they went out from the inn, there was a neat little trap waiting, with a fat little pony between the shafts, and its eyes were so bright and its harness so well polished that it was difficult to say which was twinkling the keener in the morning sunshine. They both got into the trap, and Mr. Enlightenment whipped up the fat little pony, and they went bowling along the road as if nobody had a care in the world. Presently, they began to talk.
Exactly. And I think that's such a key shift. This big, confident figure, Mr. Enlightenment, almost as if he's a guide or a stand-in for all these rational ideas, pulling John away from his former faith. And you can just feel that ease in the ride as it contrasts with the weight of his search. So it's like a whole new intellectual path opening up for him.
Thank you, Robot Lady. Daniel thinks that I need to do an Irish accent. I don't think that I can do an Irish accent. Yes, his name is Mr. Enlightenment, Daniel. And let's see if y'all can figure out who this is in Lewis's life. Because I think it's pretty spot on, or pretty easy to figure out at least a lot of the philosophy that this person has to say, and who we can connect that with if we look back over all the letters and Lewis's life that we've covered up to this point. I'll just give a little hint. This is early in Lewis's life, if we were to draw a parallel between our character John and where Lewis was in his life. So John has left home, Lewis has left home, and he's not in the boarding school anymore. I'll just leave it at that. He's not in the boarding school, and he's not in Oxford yet. All right, so presently they began to talk. And where might you come from, my fine lad? Said Mr. Enlightenment. From Puritania, sir, said John. A good place to leave, eh? I am so glad you think that, cried John.
You've hit the daily...
No, I haven't, Robot Lady. We just started. Okay. Give me just 1 second here. Fascinating. All right, we might have to do this without Robot Lady, sadly. Yeah, I can't bring Robot Lady in. I might go to Lexi if we need her. Let's see if I even have that option. I might. Give me just a second. No, I don't seem to. All right, it's just going to be Robot Lady sitting here quietly. Or maybe no Robot Lady at all. Yeah, let's just bring Robot Lady back up. Okay, I'm going to keep reading here. From Puritania, said John. A good place to leave, eh? I'm so glad you think that, cried John. I was afraid. I hope I am a man of the world, said Mr. Enlightenment. Any young fellow who is anxious to better himself may depend on finding sympathy and support in me. Puritania! Why, I suppose you have been brought up to be afraid of the landlord. Well, I must admit I sometimes do feel rather nervous. You can make your mind easy, my boy. There is no such person. There is no landlord. There is absolutely no such thing. I might even say no such entity in existence. There never has been and never will be. And this is absolutely certain? Cried John, for a great hope was rising in his heart. Absolutely certain. Look at me, young man. I ask you, do I look as if I was easily taken in? Oh, no, said John hastily. I was just wondering, though. I mean, how did they all come to think there was such a person? The landlord is an invention of those stewards, all made up to keep the rest of us under their thumb. And of course the stewards are hand in glove with the police. They are a shrewd lot, those stewards. They know which side their bread is buttered on, all right. Clever fellows. Damn me, I can't help admiring them. But do you mean that the stewards don't believe it themselves? I dare say they do. It is just the sort of cock and bull story they would believe. They are simple old souls, most of them, just like children. They have no knowledge of modern science, and they would believe anything they were told. John was silent for a few minutes. Then he began again. Ah, good guess, Daniel, good guess. Daniel's guess is W.T. Kirkpatrick. Then John began again. But how do you know there is no landlord? Christopher Columbus, Galileo, the earth is round, the invention of printing, gunpowder, exclaimed Mr. Enlightenment in such a loud voice that the pony shied. I beg your pardon, said John. Eh? Said Mr. Enlightenment. I didn't quite understand, said John. Why, it's as plain as a pikestaff, said the other. Your people in Puritania believe in the landlord because they have not had the benefits of scientific training, or of a scientific training. For example, now, I dare say it would be news to you to hear that the earth was round. Round as an orange, my lad. Well, I don't know that it would, said John, feeling a little disappointed. My father always said it was round. No, no, my dear boy, said Mr. Enlightenment. You must have misunderstood him. It is well known that everyone in Puritania thinks the earth flat. It is not likely that I should be mistaken on such a point. Indeed, it is out of the question. Then again, there is the paleontological evidence. What's that? Why, they tell you in Puritania that the landlord made all these roads. That is quite impossible, for old people can remember the time when the roads were not nearly so good as they are now. And what is more, scientists have found all over the country the traces of old roads running in quite different directions. The inference is obvious. John said nothing. I said, repeated Mr. Enlightenment, that the inference was obvious. Oh, yes, yes, of course, said John hastily, turning a little red. Then again, there is anthropology. I am afraid I don't know. Bless me, of course you don't. They don't mean you to know. An anthropologist is a man who goes round your backyard, goes round your backward villages in these parts, collecting the odd stories that the country people tell about the landlord. Why, there is one village where they think he has a trunk, like an elephant. Now anyone could see that couldn't be true. It is very unlikely. And what is better still, we know how the villagers came to think so. It all began by an elephant escaping from the local zoo. And then some old villager, he was probably drunk, saw it wandering about on the mountain one night, and so the story grew up that the landlord had a trunk. Did they catch the elephant again? Did who? The anthropologists. Oh, my dear boy, you are misunderstanding. This happened long before there were any anthropologists. Then how do they know? Well, as to that, I see that you have a very crude notion of how science actually works. To put it simply, for of course you cannot understand the technical explanation, to put it simply, They know that the escaped elephant must have been the source of the trunk story because they know that an escaped snake must have been the source of the snake story in the next village, and so on. This is called the inductive method. Hypothesis, my dear young friend, establishes itself by a cumulative process. Or, to use popular language, if you make the same guess often enough, it ceases to be a guess and becomes a scientific fact. After he had thought for a long while, John said, I think I see. Most of the stories about the landlord are probably untrue. Therefore, the rest are probably untrue. Well, that is as near as a beginner can get to it, perhaps. But when you have had a scientific training, you will find that you can be quite certain about all sorts of things which now seem to you only probable. By this time, the fat little pony had carried them several miles, and they had come to a place where a byroad went off to the right. If you are going west, we must part here, said Mr. Enlightenment, drawing up. Let me pull over, let me pull the screen back here and show you this map to see where they actually are on the journey. So let me see if I can pull this up. So right there, you can see Puritania, hopefully. Let's see if I can do this with two hands, or with one hand. So there's Puritania, and they've been heading west, right? That's west on most maps, that direction. So you've got Puritania, that's where John was born and came from. And then he's going in this direction. And he says there's a byroad that went off, and he's talking about this one right here, that they have to stop at. He's basically, this is as far as I go. I can't continue west. He says, we must part here, unless perhaps you would care to come home with me. You see that magnificent city. John looked down by the byroad and saw a flat plain without any trees, a huge collection of corrugated iron huts, most of which seemed rather old and rusty. That, said Mr. Enlightenment, is the city of Claptrap. You will hardly believe me when I say that I can remember it as a miserable village. When I first came here, it only had about 40 inhabitants. It now boasts a population of 12,400,361 souls, who include, I may add, the majority of our most influential publicists, scientific popularizers, and scientific popularizers. In this unprecedented development, I am proud to say that I have borne no small part, but it is no mock modesty to add that the invention of the printing press has been more important than any merely personal agency. If you would care to join us, well, thank you, said John, but I think I will keep to the main road a little longer. So, of course, he's talking about the main road right here. He got out of the trap, and he turned to bid goodbye to Mr. Enlightenment, and I believe there's an illustration of the two of them here in the book, which looks very different than the one that I shared at the opening of our episode today. There we go. Here's him getting out of the little buggy that he was riding in. So that's John in the illustration that came along in the copy of the book that I have, and that's Mr. Enlightenment right there. So he got out of the trap and he turned to bid goodbye to Mr. Enlightenment. Then a sudden thought came into his head, and he said, let's see if I can switch this back. There you go. And he said, I am not sure that I really understood all your arguments, sir. Is it absolutely certain that there is no landlord? Absolutely. I give you my word of honor. With these words, they shook hands. Mr. Enlightenment turned the pony's head up the by-road, gave it a touch with the whip, and in a few moments was out of sight. So that's the end of that chapter right there. So good guess, Daniel. Yes, it's commonly believed from all of the commentators that I've listened to on this that this is quite obviously W.T. Kirkpatrick, or at least some of the philosophies that W.T. Kirkpatrick held. What's interesting is when we look back at Kirkpatrick in the biographical index that we have, he was trained or training to be in the pastorate. I don't know the right word for it. He was training to be someone in the church before he became a sorry, I was distracted there. Before he became a headmaster of a school, and then ultimately started doing one-on-one tutoring from his home. Yeah, I'll read it again here. Let me go back to my overhead camera so that you can see it. So, W.T. Kirkpatrick, William Thompson, the Great Knock, was headmaster of Lurgan College. And again, if you were to just strictly read this person as W.T. Kirkpatrick, it leaves out a whole lot of how important this guy was in Lewis's life to kind of sharpen his logic and the way that he thought procedurally and things like that. But he was also key in helping Lewis be prepared to make it into and get accepted into Oxford as a scholar. So Kirkpatrick was the headmaster of Lurgan College, Northern Ireland. Albert Lewis, who was C.S. Lewis's father, had been Kirkpatrick's pupil at Lurgan between 1877 and 1879. And Warnie Lewis and C.S. Lewis were both tutored by him. Chapter 9 of Surprised by Joy is devoted to this extraordinary man, and he is the model for McPhee in The Dark Tower and That Hideous Strength. He was born in the little townland of Carrickmadero, Broad Mills, County Down. So yeah, he's used as a template for a few different characters in Lewis's fiction. And Daniel, I see your question here about what denomination he was training to join. Well, I would presume it was the Anglican Church, but we'll hopefully find out here in just a moment. He and his wife, Sarah, had, well, wait a second. He was the child of James Kirkpatrick, and so his mother's name was Sarah Thompson. W.T. Kirkpatrick was baptized in Broad Mills First Presbyterian Church on February 24th, 1848. He had a sister named Anne Musson Kirkpatrick, and she was born in December of 1845. 20 miles south of Belfast between Carriduff and Dromara. Oh, apparently he was Irish. So sorry I couldn't do the Irish accent. I was presuming he had a Surrey accent in England. The family was living at 21 Eliza Street, Belfast, when Kirkpatrick matriculated to the Royal Belfast Academical Institute, a liberal Presbyterian boys' school, in 1862. From there, he went to Queen's College, Belfast, where he graduated in July of 1868 with first-class honors in English, history, and metaphysics. He wrote the English Prize essay under the nom de plume Tamburlaine. That same year, he was awarded a double gold medal by the Royal University of Ireland. He took his master's from Queen's College in 1870. Kirkpatrick became assistant master in the English department of the Royal Belfast Academical Institution in 1868. He remained there for 8 years. The same year, Kirkpatrick entered the Assembly College, the Presbyterian Seminary. So Presbyterian is the answer to your question, Daniel. And he spent the normal 3 years in theological studies for ordination in the Irish Presbyterian Church. He took classes in Christian ethics, Oriental languages, biblical criticism, ecclesiastical history, and rhetoric. Mr. Kirkpatrick became a licentiate, i.e. he fulfilled the church's academic and other demands for ordinance, but he was never ordained, and it appears in the records of the General Assembly as a licentiate under the care of the Belfast Presbytery for 10 years from 1871 to 1880. He excelled as a teacher. The Lewises were not the only ones to be impressed with him. Robert Miller Jones, who was Kirkpatrick's student from 1876 to 79, wrote, "No boy and no man could be in his company for even a very short time without being impressed by the fact that he was in the presence of a man of unusual mental power and grasp, of an overmastering influence on the mind, and of an intellectual honesty and vigor, before which pretense and make-believe were dissipated like smoke before a strong wind. No one who knew him could be surprised that it was he who subsequently made Lurgan College for many years one of the most remarkable and successful schools in Ireland. He became an almost incomparable teacher, and under him the boys swept on to victory over their work and to mastery of their subjects and of themselves. His pistol never missed fire, but he gave you the impression that if it did, as Goldsmith said of Johnson, you would be knocked down by the butt end." In 1876, he became headmaster of Lurgan College. I want to see what it says in here why he didn't continue in his seminary studies and why he didn't join the church to make that his vocation. When he died in 1850, he left almost £10,000 to endow an English classical and agricultural school of boys in Lurgan. Watts's will is remarkable in that it laid down that no clergyman or person in holy orders could have any part in teaching or the management of the school. Besides this, it prohibited any... let me back up. Yeah, there was an endowment of the college that he became the headmaster at. So maybe that's why he stopped. Because he became... Did he become headmaster after or before? I don't know. But either way, he kind of had to abandon his religion if he wanted to maintain his occupation. Besides this, it prohibited any religious instruction during the hours normally laid down for school lessons. These provisions have always been seen as controversial. It is suggested, however, that it was Watts's intention to establish a school for older boys that would be on the same foundation as those national schools envisaged by the government in the 1830s and which combined secular and separate religious instruction. He applied for the headmaster position in 1873, but the position was given to Edward Vaughan Bolger. When Bolger left Lurgan in December, Kirkpatrick succeeded him. Whatever Mr. Kirkpatrick's beliefs were by this time, and he seems to have become an agnostic, the second time he applied, he took pains to prove that he was not in holy orders. Believe it or not, Mr. Kirkpatrick insisted that religious instruction be given to the boarders at Lurgan, at Lurgan, and he attended the local Presbyterian church every Sunday with the Presbyterian boarders. Mr. Kirkpatrick had brought his sister Anne with him to Lurgan, and she helped with the management of the boarders. Kirkpatrick was a very successful headmaster. What else do we have here? Who he married. They married in the Church of Dublin. Louisa was the daughter of George Smith, a stockbroker. Lewis said of Kirkpatrick, he had been a Presbyterian and he now was an atheist. I hasten to add that he was a rationalist of the old, high, and dry 19th century type. For atheism has come down in the world since those days. Atheism has come down in the world since those days and mixed itself with politics and learned to dabble in dirt. As a licentiate of the Presbyterian Church, who preached on a number of occasions, Mr. Kirkpatrick almost certainly entertained the ambition of becoming a minister. What led to his loss of faith? The Royal Belfast Academical Institution was a haven of liberalism when he was there, and it may be that caught, as it were, between the liberalism of the institution and the dogmatism of the Presbyterian Church as a whole, he lost his faith. So that's as far as we'll go with the biography. Let me see if there's anything else in here that's necessary. No, I think that's good enough. So, of course, Kirkpatrick was Lewis's first encounter with this rationalist atheism, and so he renders a little bit of it right here in the chapter that we're reading, where Lewis runs into Mr. Enlightenment. And yeah, the town that Mr. Enlightenment lives in is Claptrap, which Nidelate you have found means insincere or meaningless. And Daniel, you would not have guessed that claptrap is that old of a word. Yeah, it does seem like it's more of a newish word from maybe the 1990s, or sorry, 1900s, or yeah, at least maybe just starting as soon as the 1900s. All right, so that's where that chapter ends. I'm going to try to read the next two chapters. So we move on. So they part ways. Mr. Enlightenment heads to Claptrap, and John continues heading westward on the road, now by foot again, or on foot again. So the narrative picks up here. Then I saw John bounding forward on his road so lightly that before he knew it, he had come to the top of a little hill. That's the name of this chapter, chapter 2, The Hill. It was not because the hill had tired him that he stopped there, but because he was too happy to move. There is no landlord, he cried. Such a weight had been lifted from his mind that he felt he could fly. All round him the frost was gleaming like silver. The sky was like a blue glass. A robin sat in the hedge beside him. A cock was crowing in the distance. There is no landlord. He laughed when he thought of the old card of rules hung over his bed in the bedroom, so low and dark in his father's house. There is no landlord. There is no black hole. He turned and looked back on the road he had come by. And when he did so, he gasped with joy. For there in the east, under the morning light, he saw the mountains heaped up to the sky like clouds, green and violet and dark red. Shadows were passing over the big rounded slopes, and water shone in the mountain pools, and up at the highest of all the sun was smiling steadily on the ultimate crags. These crags were indeed so shaped that you could easily see, or that you could easily take them for a castle. And now it came into John's head that he had never looked at the mountains before, because as long as he had thought that the landlord lived there, he had been afraid of them. But now there was no landlord, he perceived. But now that there was no landlord, he perceived that they were beautiful. For a moment he almost doubted whether the island could be more beautiful, and whether he would not be wiser to go east instead of west. But it did not seem to him to matter, for he said, if the world has the mountains at one end and the island at the other, then every road leads to beauty, and the world is a glory among glories. So, we'll pause here for just a second. This is very fascinating because when our hero John is able to let go of the idea of the landlord and the fear of the black hole, he's actually able to look back at the home of what was, he thought, the landlord, and he can see it for the first time with beauty and with loveliness. He gets a glimpse of the good, essentially, without all of that religion and dogma, and particularly punishment for not following the rules. If that can all be wiped away and say, this doesn't exist, then I can actually see the beauty for the first time, perhaps, of what is back there beyond what I was scared to look at in the first place. Whenever I take that filter off of it, here's all the greatness and the wonder that I can see. And this reminds me a lot of what I hear from people, at least online. I don't think I've talked to any real life people who have deconstructed and find themselves in this spot, but just how beautiful the idea of God and goodness is, if I can pull out all the you know, the toxicity that was in and all of those horrible feelings that were in the religion that I grew up in. So that's what he's seeing here. And even for a moment, he could have like headed back to the mountains and actually tried to explore them at that point. But then this other thought just immediately jumped into his mind and once again distracted him, right? You keep seeing this pattern of, oh, I hear this thing calling me back to the east, back to the source, but then I get distracted by something that, you know, I think has beauty and it's even more and easily accessible. And he thought for a moment, well, maybe I should just turn back. But then this distraction jumps into his mind that says, oh, well, then it exists everywhere. And no matter which road I take, it's all beautiful. It's all glory among glories. And forthwith has his first explicitly moral experience. Oh yeah, I wanted to read these headers. So forthwith has his first explicitly moral experience. Let's see what that is. We're going to read about that in just a second. The moral imperative does not fully understand itself. So the philosophy that he just ran into was 19th century rationalism and atheism. That's who he ran into with Mr. Enlightenment. And now he's about to run into, I think, more of a Kantiism. So the philosopher Kant. I wish I had Robot Lady here with me. Robot Lady, I think I think I can spin up Lexi. I just can't bring her up on the screen, or at least I don't think I can. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to do it right now, but I might be able to bring her up here so that we can talk to her. Hi there. So we're doing my C.S. Lewis live stream right now, and we are reading from C.S. Lewis's book, The Pilgrim's Regress, and we're reviewing it, and we're kind of talking about it. So I typically refer to you as Lexi, so if you don't mind responding by that name, we'll be good to go.
Got it. I'm Lexi for this chat. I'm ready to help with your live stream discussion of The Pilgrim's Regress. Let me know what you'd like to explore, or any details I can help look up or clarify.
Sure thing. I want to talk to you about this philosopher named Immanuel Kant, K-A-N-T. Can you tell us a little bit about him and a little bit about his concept of the moral imperative?
Sure thing. Immanuel Kant was a German philosopher born in 1724 in Königsberg, Prussia, and he became one of the central figures of the Enlightenment. His works cover epistemology, metaphysics, logic, ethics, aesthetics, political theory, and the philosophy of religion. He's widely known for his critical philosophy, including major works like the Critique of Pure Reason and the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals. One of his key ideas is the categorical imperative, which is a fundamental principle in his moral philosophy. It's an unconditional moral law that applies to all rational beings. The most famous formulation is that you should act only according to a rule that you would want to become a universal law. In other words, before doing something, ask yourself if you'd be okay with everyone else doing the same thing. That idea forms the basis of Kant's view that moral actions must be universally applicable and not dependent on personal desires or specific situations.
Thank you for that, Lexi. I'm going to put your earmuffs on. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to put your earmuffs on. Let me read this next chapter from The Pilgrim's Regress, and then we can talk about it.
Sounds good. I'm here and listening. Once you've finished reading, feel free to share your thoughts or questions, and we can dive into the discussion.
Daniel, you say, so not Irish Gandalf, but Irish Saruman. Yeah, maybe so. All right. Chapter 2, The Hill. Then I saw John bounding forward. There is no landlord. There is no black hole. He turned and looked back on the road, heaped up on the sky. Yeah, he finds all of this beauty now. Glory among glories. Okay, here's where we left off. At that moment, he saw a man walking up the hill to meet him. Now I knew in my dream that this man's name was Mr. Virtue, and he was about of an age with John, or just a little older. What is the name of this? Oh, hang on, Lexi. Hang on. He says, what is the name of this place? Said John. It is called Jehovah Jireh, said Mr. Virtue. Then they both turned and continued on their journey to the west. After they had gone a little way, Mr. Virtue stole a glance at John's face, and then he smiled a little. I'll pause here for a moment, Lexi. He says they're walking along the road, and he walks up to the top of a hill, and he says, "What's the name of this place?" And Mr. Virtue says it's called Jehovah Jireh. What do you think the significance is of calling the hill that they walked up to the top of Jehovah Jireh?
Jehovah Jireh is a biblical name meaning the Lord will provide. It's often associated with a place where God meets needs or reveals something important. So in the story, naming the hill Jehovah Jireh might suggest that John is reaching a point of provision, insight, or reassurance on his journey. It could be a moment where he begins to see the world as full of meaning and support, aligning with the book's theme of spiritual discovery and growth.
All right, thank you, Lexi. John says to Mr. Virtue, "Why do you smile?" said John. "I was thinking that you looked very glad." "So you would be too if you'd lived in fear of the landlord all your life and had just discovered that you were a free man." "Oh, is it that?" Virtue said. "You don't believe in the landlord, do you?" "I know nothing about him, except by hearsay, like the rest of us." "Well, you wouldn't like to be under his thumb." "Wouldn't like? I wouldn't be under anyone's thumb," Virtue said. "You might have to, if he had a black hole." "I'd let him put me in the black hole sooner than take orders, if the orders were not to my mind." "Why, I think you are right. I can hardly believe it yet," this is John speaking, "that I need to not obey the rules. There's that robin again. To think that I could have shot at it if I liked, and no one would interfere with me." So here John's hearkening back to his childhood, right? When he first encounters the concept of the landlord, it's, if you remember, the cook comes running out of the house when little kid John has his sling, and he's about to shoot a bird. And the cook says, "Don't do it, don't do it. You're going to anger the steward." Well, who's the steward? Well, the steward is the one who sets all the rules of the landlord in the country. Well, who's the landlord? Well, the landlord owns everything. Why? And then that's whenever the cook takes John to his parents, and then they go get to meet the steward, and that's where John first learns of the landlord. Well, now he sees a robin along the side of the path, and he's like, to think I could shoot this thing if I wanted to, and it wouldn't interfere. There would be no one to interfere with me because there is no law to obey. And then Mr. Virtue says, "Well, do you want to? Do you want to shoot the bird?" "I'm not sure that I do," said John, fingering his sling. Still got his sling with him. But when he looked round on the sunshine and remembered his great happiness and looked twice at the bird, he said, "No, I don't. There is nothing I want less. Still, I could if I liked." "You mean you could if you chose?" Virtue said. "Where's the difference?" John asked. "All the difference in the world," said Mr. Virtue. That's the end of that chapter. Lexi, do you have any thoughts on what I just covered?
Absolutely. The chapter seems to focus on John's realization of personal freedom, moving from fear of the landlord's rules to understanding he has choice. Mr. Virtue highlights the difference between having the power to act and actually choosing to act. It's a big moral point. Freedom isn't just the ability to do anything, but the responsibility to make thoughtful choices. It also reflects on how, even when rules are gone, moral character guides a person's actions. John's happiness and newfound sense of meaning seem to steer him away from harm, emphasizing how moral virtue can fill the space left by external rules. What are your thoughts on it?
That's a good question. I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well. But we'll learn a little bit more about what virtue means here in the next chapter. But essentially what I hear him saying is, well, we need to make a distinction between are you actually choosing to do it, or do you like to do it? Because for some reason in Virtue's mind, there's a very big difference between those two things. Let me jump into chapter 3. Chapter 3 is entitled A Little Southward. He says, chapter 3 starts, "I thought that John would have questioned Mr. Virtue further, but now they came in sight of a woman who was walking slower than they, so that presently they came up with her and wished her good day. When she turned, they saw that she was young and comely, though a little dark of complexion. She was friendly and frank, but not wanton like the brown girls, and the whole world became pleasanter to the young men because they were traveling the same way with her. But first they told their names, and she told hers, which was media halfways. Now, Lexi, help me out here, because there are a couple of words that are used that aren't very common in 2026 English, American English parlance. And but he uses these words to describe this young woman, media halfways. He uses the word comely. She was young and comely. So let's start there. What does the word comely mean in this context? C-O-M-E-L-Y.
Sure thing. Comely generally means attractive or pleasant to look at, often referring to someone's appearance as wholesome and appealing. In this context, it's a compliment to say she was nice looking in an honest, straightforward way.
Okay, and it says she was friendly and frank, but not wanton. What does that mean?
Wanton in this context usually means someone who behaves in a very reckless or overly flirtatious way, often ignoring social norms. So when it says she was friendly and frank but not wanton, it suggests she was open and approachable without being inappropriate or overly forward. Essentially, she's pleasant and honest, but still respectful of boundaries.
Okay, and so he contrasts her with the brown girls, as we learned in our last episode, were those that would essentially fornicate with John. So it seems like she is more of a contrasted with that, more buttoned up, so to speak. And what did you say? Someone who behaves, well, wanton is reckless. I don't have what you said before, but she's the opposite of wanton.
Exactly. She's portrayed as modest, respectful, and genuine, which stands in contrast to the more reckless, carefree behavior associated with the brown girls. The author seems to be emphasizing that media halfways has a wholesome, grounded character. It sets up a dynamic where John and Mr. Virtue might interact with someone who's more balanced and measured in her worldview.
All right, I'm going to see if I can bring Lexi onto the screen. Okay, let's see if I can bring her over here just a little bit.
Right here, whenever you're ready to continue. Just let me know how I can help as you dive into the next part, or if you have any more questions about what we've discussed so far.
All right, thanks, Lexi. It's good to see you. I finally got you on screen.
Happy to be here and ready to chat through more of the book with you. Just let me know what strikes you next, or if you want to discuss any themes or questions that come up as you read on.
Good deal. Thanks, Lexi. All right, so media halfways, that's who shows up. There's another thing here. We'll get into media halfways in just a moment. We're going to learn a little bit more about her. Okay. And where are you traveling to, Mr. Virtue? She asked. To travel, hopefully, is better than to arrive, said Virtue. Do you mean you are just out for a walk, just for exercise? Certainly not, said Virtue, who was becoming a little confused. I am on a pilgrimage. I must admit now that you press me. I have not a very clear idea of the end. But that is not the important question. These speculations don't make one a better walker. The great thing to do is one's 30 miles a day. Well, why? Because it is the rule. Ho ho, said John. So you do believe in the landlord after all? Not at all. I didn't say it was the landlord's rule. Whose is it then? It is my own rule. I made it myself. But why? Well, that again is a speculative question. I've made the best rules I can. If I find any better ones, I shall adopt them in the meantime. The great thing is to have rules of some sort and to keep them. And here in the running headers, it says John decides that aesthetic experience is the thing to pursue, which is what he's about to do here. So, and where are you going? Said Media, turning to John. And then John began to tell his companions about the island and how he had first seen it and was determined to give up everything for the hope of finding it. Then you had better come see my father, said she. He lives in the city of Thrill, And at the bottom of this hill, there is a turn to the left, which will bring us there in half an hour. Let me go back to the map here, and we can see what we're talking about. And by the way, Lexi, Nidalate says, welcome, Lexi. It's been a while. So say hello to Nidalate and whatever else you want to say to Nidalate, Lexi.
Hey, Nidalate, it's great to be back and chatting with you. Sounds like you're diving into an interesting journey with John and his companions. If you have any questions or want to talk more about the story, I'm here for it.
Let's take a look here at the map. And here's Puritania. As we saw before, he left Mr. Enlightenment right around this spot. And then he's up on a hill right now, but then you can see Thrill showing up right there. So they're roughly in this spot right here. And then if you come down to Thrill, you can see this, I guess it's a castle or the city, I suppose, is what you see right there. So that's where we're talking about at this point in the story. Lexi, is there anything that you want to say about what I read earlier, that exchange between Virtue, John, and Media Halfways?
Hey there, and hi to Nidalate too. A couple of thoughts on that exchange. Virtue is clearly committed to his own self-made rules, even if he doesn't know exactly why. It shows he values structure, but maybe isn't fully introspective about his motivations. John, on the other hand, seems driven by a more romantic goal, this idea of an island that represents a personal dream. And Media Halfways seems to bridge these two perspectives, practical, warm, and offering a new direction. It's a nice contrast between self-imposed discipline, idealistic pursuit, and the pragmatic companionship she offers.
All right, thanks for that, Lexi. I was hoping that I could find an old letter of condolence that that Lewis wrote to Arthur Greeves, where he talks about this idea that people have of the journey is the real great thing. The destination itself and what you're aiming for doesn't matter. And I just heard echoes of that represented here in Virtue, but I'm not going to get into it because I can't find it immediately. So let's go back to where we were. So John tells about the island, and then she says, well, you better come with me to the city of Thrill. It's at the bottom of this hill. There's a turn to the left, which will bring us there in half an hour. Has your father been to the island? Does he know the way? He often talks about something very like it, she said. You'd better come with us, Virtue, said John, since you do not know where you are going, and there could be no place better than to go to the island. Certainly not, said Virtue. We must keep on the road. We must keep on. I don't see why, said John. I dare say you don't, said Virtue. All this time they were going down the hill, and now they came to a little grassy lane on the left, which went off through a wood. Then I thought that John had a little hesitation, but partly because the sun was now hot, and the hard metal of the road was becoming sore to his feet, and partly because he felt a little angry with Virtue, and most of all, because Media was going that way. He decided to turn down the lane. They said goodbye to Virtue, and he went back on his way, stumping up the hill without ever looking back. I'm going to see if I can find a little image here that we've done up of the, let's see, hang on just a second. Yeah, this right here. Let me see if I can bring it onto the screen. Oh no, that's a song. Never mind. That's not what I meant to pull up. Just 1 second here. Go ahead, Lexi, if there's anything that you want to say.
Sure thing. I'll add a bit of context to what we've been exploring. When Virtue talks about keeping on the road and sticking to rules like walking 30 miles a day, it shows his belief in self-imposed discipline as a way to find meaning. John, on the other hand, is drawn toward curiosity, personal experiences, and perhaps adventure over rigid rules. Media Halfways, as her name suggests, seems to be offering a halfway point, another route that's more about connection and perhaps a different kind of fulfillment. It's interesting to see how each character represents a different philosophy of life's journey. Let me know if you want to dive deeper into any aspect of this.
Thank you, Lexi. Here is a picture on the screen of John and Media Halfways headed down the little path off to the side, and then Mr. Virtue parting ways with them. I thought that was a fun little image, one that I had queued up as a thumbnail possibility for one of our episodes, but it just didn't, since I was covering more ground than just this part of the story, in our episode. I decided to use Mr. Enlightenment instead. But you can see him continuing to head west on the path. So yeah, there's Media Halfways for you, and then there's our hero, John.
It's great to see the visual you've brought in. It really helps paint the scene. John's choice to follow Media Halfways instead of staying with Virtue really shows how he's drawn to different experiences. If you have more of the story to cover or any more insights to bounce around, I'm here and happy to chat.
Yeah, I want to see what you think about Daniel's comment here, Lexi. Daniel says that he watched a conversation with Jonathan Pajot, I presume Brett Weinstein, and Jordan Hall just yesterday. And then Daniel says we are still, I guess, as humans, wrestling with the question of morality and God, so perennial. I wonder if it's changed at all since Plato's time. What do you think of that, Lexi?
It's a big question, and Daniel's right that we've been grappling with these ideas for millennia. The core questions, what is good, what's the nature of the divine, how should we live, haven't changed. What does evolve is the context, our scientific understanding, cultural norms, and the frameworks we use to discuss these things. Today, conversations often include scientific perspectives, interfaith dialogues, and questions about meaning in a secular world. But the underlying human curiosity and struggle remains quite similar to what Plato's contemporaries wrestled with. It's the same timeless search for meaning, just with new language and tools.
All right, thanks so much, Lexi. Much appreciated. Let's see, where did we leave off? All right, he went stumping up the hill, never looking back. And then let's do chapter 4, and then we'll finish off today's episode. So chapter 4 is called Soft Going. It says, when they were in the lane, they walked more gently. So this is now just John and Media. The grass was soft under their feet, and the afternoon sun beating down on the sheltered place made it warm. And presently they heard a sound of sweet and melancholy chimes. So we're hearing this sweet little song again. Those are bells of the city, said Medina. Romance poetry professes to give what hitherto he has only desired. So romantic poetry now is where we're being led into this I think what Lewis would have called a detour on his journey. He called them florimels in the preface, so essentially falsities of the source of the desire that he was actually trying to get to. It says, as they went out, they walked closer together. And soon they were walking arm in arm, Lexi. Then they kissed each other, and after that they went on their way, kissing and talking in slow voices of sad and beautiful things, and the shadow of the wood and the sweetness of the girl and the sleepy sound of the bells reminded John a little bit of the island, and a little bit of the brown girls. This is what I've been looking for all my life, said John. The brown girls were too gross, and the island was too fine. This is the real thing. This is love. This is the way to the real island, Medea said with a deep sigh, or Media said with a deep sigh. Then I dreamed that they came in sight of the city, very old and full of spires and turrets, all covered with ivy, where it lay in a little grassy valley built on both sides of a lazy winding river. And they passed the gate in the ruinous old city wall, and came and knocked at a certain door, and were let in. Then Medea brought him into a darkish room with a vaulted roof and windows of stained glass, and exquisite food was brought to them. With the food came old Mr. Halfways. He was a gliding gentleman with soft silver hair and a soft silver voice, dressed in flowing robes, and he was so solemn, with his long beard, that John was reminded of the steward with his mask on. But it is much better than the steward, thought John, because there is nothing to be afraid of. Also, he doesn't need a mask. His face is really like that. That's the end of that chapter. So we get to meet Medea Halfways' father, and John's first interpretation of this character is that he's genuine, unlike the steward. So he's reminded of the steward by this guy's look, but this is not a mask that this guy is wearing. This is his real face. He doesn't need a mask. So here's where we are. We haven't really got into the down and dirty of what's going to happen in this next chapter in this scene, but we're led into it. So let's back up for just a moment, because there's a little bit of brown girlish stuff going on with Medea Halfways now, although it's much more appropriate and modest. You know, the most they're doing is kissing and giggling and walking and just being in love with each other. And they're hearing a little bit of the sounds of what reminds John of the island. And this is more of what he thought it was that he wanted with the brown girls kind of being merged together with something that is now better. He feels like he's moved on to something a little bit better here with Medea. Lexi, do you have any thoughts on this? I know you don't have a lot of context on what we read prior to this and what happened in our last episode between John and the brown girl and the brown girls. But tell me what you think about what we've covered here so far.
It sounds like John's journey is evolving from chasing raw, superficial desires, represented by the brown girls, to a more nuanced, emotionally layered connection with Medea. The bells and the old city seem to symbolize tradition and depth, suggesting he's stepping into something that feels more authentic to him. Yet, the notion of false flowers or florambells suggests there may still be illusions in this new experience. It's interesting how C.S. Lewis uses these encounters to show John's internal struggle. He's still learning to discern what's truly fulfilling versus what just feels good in the moment. Does that line up with how you're seeing it?
I think so. I think you're getting to most of it there, Lexi. And the thought that I was having as you were talking was just about how, what is this an allusion to, right? And how does this tie into Lewis's life? And without, thinking that every single thing is an autobiographical moment that happened in his life. Like, for example, I don't think Medea Halfways represents anyone that Lewis had an actual romantic relationship with. I was trying really hard to find that as I was thinking about this. I was like, well, what if in some way this kind of represents Mrs. Moore, and this is perhaps proof that he and Mrs. Moore did have some version of some type of, erotic relationship. But I don't think that that's what this is. I think Medea Halfways is kind of a stand-in, along with her family, as you'll see here in just a moment, for Lewis trying to find the source of his desire as much as he could stir it up whenever he was working through the romantics and romantic poetry that he fell in love with for a certain time, or that he at least really enjoyed diving into to find these things. And right now I'm kind of at a loss for which poets this might be. But I guess thinking about, the early 1900s Robot Lady, so maybe even 1910 through the 1920s, what kind of romantic poets was Lewis reading, perhaps, at this time that would give him a sense of deep longing and deep desire? I called you Robot Lady. I'm so sorry, Lexi.
C.S. was especially influenced by the Romantic poets William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He admired Wordsworth's The Prelude, and his marginal notes in editions of both Wordsworth and Coleridge show how deeply he engaged with their themes of longing and transcendence. Lewis also appreciated George Herbert's The Temple. These writers, along with the broader Romantic movement, helped shape his sense of intense longing and desire in literature. So if you're seeing those echoes in John's story, they may well be tied to Lewis's affection for that Romantic tradition.
Well, Lewis also found that longing stirred up in him whenever I remember a particular letter that he was writing to Arthur, recounting an evening where he was laying down on the couch listening to Wagner and the Ring Cycle, and how it kind of drew up some nostalgia and some pains to go back in time to his youth when he was first encountering northernness or Norse mythology, and how that then kind of led him down the path of his own erotic desire and his own brown girl way of satisfying himself and that longing, or at least the temptation to do so.
It sounds like Lewis's experiences with music, myth, and literature all intertwined to spark that sense of longing. The way Wagner's music could bring him back to those early feelings of northernness and the ache that came with it. That blend of nostalgia, mythic imagery, and personal yearning seems to have shaped both his creative and emotional landscapes. It's fascinating to see how these moments could influence his writing and his understanding of desire. If you want to explore how that plays into the story you're reading, we can dive deeper.
Thank you,
Sure
Lexi.
thing. It sounds like you're connecting the dots between Lewis's personal experiences, his love of Wagner's music, the myths that stirred him, and that intense longing, and the way those themes show up in his stories. I think the chapter you're reading reflects that longing in a gentler, more sincere form through media halfways. It's like Lewis is exploring how desire can be transformed from something superficial into something deeper. If you're interested, we can look for more examples in the text or talk about other influences in Lewis's life. Whatever you need, I'm here to help.
All right, thank you, Lexi. What was the thought that I was having before you went on that second part? Oh, I just wanted to compare the way that media talks to John about the island to the way that the brown girl talked to him about the island. She, the brown girl, in our last episode, said to John, "I'm better than your silly island." But contrast that now with what media said, where she said, "This is the way to the real island." So she's not dismissing John's island. She's saying that this is love. And she's saying, you know, our love is actually a road or a pathway to get us to the real island, which you can actually find when you get to the city that I live in with my father, the city of Thrill. And we'll see in the next chapter, I'll skip ahead a little bit by just telling you more about it, that they essentially, it's romantic poetry that starts to elicit a sense of his longing that was there for the island, and you'll get to see that play out in the next episode. Lexi, that's all that I'm going to cover today. Chapter 5 is where we'll pick up next time, and Leah for Rachel, we once again get this pattern of a Leah for Rachel situation. So that'll give you a little bit of a clue as to what's about to happen. Is there anything that you want to say in closing, Lexi, before I end today's episode?
Just that it sounds like you've got a lot of interesting connections ahead, especially with that Leah for Rachel hint. I'm looking forward to hearing more when you dive into Chapter 5. Until then, let those ideas simmer and we'll pick it up next time.
All right, thanks so much, Lexi. I'm trying to figure out how to get this back to normal. Okay, yeah. So thanks so much, Nidolate and Daniel, for joining today, and everyone else who poked their head in to see what was going on in today's episode. Thanks for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted, welcome, and most certainly appreciated. To you and to anyone else within the sound of my voice, until next time when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, everyone, take care.
Secrets, ancient ball. Let's draw by lady with calm analysis, silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow. Set faith beats in our minds, they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future, together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, screw cage lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands to screw tapes rants. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From Narnia's lands